And good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Everybody, do me a favor. I know we have just gone live right now. So we want everybody to please go and start sharing this, whether you are on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, whether you're on our nojusticepact.org website, wherever you are tuned in at, we would like for you to go in right now and start sharing this. Start sharing this and pushing this out because this is a conversation that we don't want anybody to miss. I mean, we have a heavy, heavy hitter panel discussion moderated by a good friend, of ours here at No Justice, No Peace. So, with that being said, I will not hold you, but let me introduce our moderator for the night. And we are continuing our October series of From the March to the Mic, where we're talking about activism and civic engagement and how are we looking at issues that are facing the Black and brown communities, not just in the state of Iowa, but also across this country. Matt Gilbert is an attorney. Attorney Gilbert is a Drake Law School alum, an Iowa native who descends from generations of servant leadership within this state. His family, the Ferguson Harris Nash family, has impacted civil rights, economic progress, and social advancement for African Americans throughout the state of Iowa since the 1900s. Mr. Gilbert, Attorney Gilbert, is a trusted advocate with the ability to mobilize resources and engage communities in sophisticated business, tax, and its economic impacts and opportunities. Attorney Gilbert demonstrates his commitment to economic justice and empowering strong communities through his leadership in grassroots organizing, organizing charitable organizations, and developing public private partnerships that advance the social, political, and economic needs of communities of color. Attorney Gilbert is passionate about group economics, philanthropy, and leveraging tax subsidies to grow and sustain communities of color. At this time, I am happy, I am glad, or as we would say, Matt, I am peacock proud and hyena happy to have you moderate this conversation and join us today. So thank you so much, and it is now yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. I really appreciate this time. I really appreciate the invite to.
We may have had a quick technical difficulty. Give me just 1 second here. We will get everything back up and going. Again, this program is being moderated by our good friend attorney Matt Gilbert, and we're waiting for him. Oh, there he is. All right.
Yeah, my apologies. My apologies. I was so ready to wrap here. No, this has been a great experience. Just watching how our communities are really aligned right now, and I'm just so happy that you put together a panelist of Black and brown men to really redress some things in our communities. And what I'd like to do is take a moment to introduce our panelists. And what I'm going to do is just say their names, and then the panelists are going to come on board and just mention a few things about themselves, and then we'll get right into our discussion. I'd like to begin with Mr. Patrick Peacock. Are you there?
I am. Thank you so very much. And let me tell you this, I am so ecstatic and just to have this opportunity. And thank Rob for putting this together. My name is Patrick Peacock, born and raised in Southside Chicago, attended Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, majored in agricultural business economics. I enlisted in the Army as an infantry soldier, became an infantry officer. I retired 2018 as a captain of the United States Army and decided to retire in Davenport, Iowa. And shortly after that, I ran for city council here in Davenport, and I've been on the city council for 1 year. That's a pretty brief bio.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peacock. I really appreciate that and appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Steve Valataro, are you there, Steve?
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much. My name is Steve Latoro, and I'm the former chair of the Iowa Democratic Party Latino Caucus, and also on community leader and the political director of the Unified Deported Veterans. And I'm still fighting for the Latino community. All the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Ryan Stevenson.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was
Uh,
just introducing. Are you still
uh,
there?
sorry.
What's up? I'm Ryan Stevenson. Was born and raised in Waterloo. Studied political communication at the University of Northern Iowa. Had the opportunity to work on various campaigns on a local level, state level, and federal level. Right now, I work as a district representative for Congresswoman Abby Finkenauer. Had the honor and the privilege to work alongside State Representative Ross Smith in informing and passing the More Perfect Union legislation on the state level, which addressed police reform. So, thank you all for having me.
Thank you for being here, Ryan. Really appreciate that. And Mark Rocha.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to join. Currently, I'm the treasurer for LULAC, League of Latin American Citizens here in Des Moines. I'm the political director for my union, CWA 7102, and I'm the secretary treasurer of the local as well. So I've held several offices there. With LULAC, we've been trying to get out the Latino vote on some mailings and phone calling. So I'm just proud to be here and try to get some information to learn something every day. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate that. And so, what I like to do is just sort of start with our panel. Just really taking a moment to really just tap in with you right now as Black and brown men. Some of you are fathers, brothers, uncles. I just want to understand sort of what's going on right now. How are you doing these days? How has 2020 been for you? Like, really help the people understand from your vantage point, which a lot of times is often misrepresented. How are things going you're seeing day to day? Anybody can begin.
I'll start. This is Pat. I think, people need to truly understand what type of time we're living in right now. Not only are we dealing with COVID-19, not only are we dealing with economic depression, but healthcare disparities across the board. And I think when we talk about America, I think we also got to talk about what happens in Black America. All those things I just named hit our community very hard, and those things need to be talked about, not as individually, but to your point, as all those things collectively, and then we have to really address those things. But in the community here in Davenport, we try to we are resilient. We try to do our best we can, but it's hard. It's hard out here. People are not hiring because of the COVID-19. And it's troubling, problematic. Trying to really keep that happy face going. Everybody try to everything's straight, but it's not. But we try to keep the happy face going by, once again, people here in Davenport resilient, and we're gonna make our way out of here. One thing we do know is that we're gonna find a way to live. We're gonna find a way to progress, and that's the beauty of it. We are aspirational, and we're gonna find a way.
Mm-hmm. That's really great. Yeah, thanks for speaking that. Steve or Mark, the Latinx community has also, been, I think in some respects, marginalized further through this COVID experience and through this pandemic. How have you seen, especially the Latinx community, sort of respond in this moment, in this time during 2020?
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, it's it's a good question, but I believe the Latino community and the Afro American community, we had the same issues, in health. Uh, if you see the news, the Latino community and the Afro American community, we're losing jobs every day. The Latino community and the Afro American community will have in trouble try to get the new jobs, because the discrimination. The COVID-19 is damaged, the both community. But the good things about the 2020 right now is a change, and after what happened months ago in Minnesota, everything is changing, and it's a good, it's a good changing, and I believe regarding to the COVID-19, uh, it's very complicated, for both communities, for the Afro Americans and the Latinos. They're very complicated right now, and it's a good time to be united,
Mhm,
and work together to fix those issues.
mhm. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
what something just sticks out of my mind. We have a lot of Hispanics that have jobs, or maybe three, but two, and they've lost their job. Probably both of them due to the virus, and they're struggling to get by or to make ends meet or trying to find other work. And I could just talk about the building I work in. It was all Hispanics working, housekeeping and so forth, and nobody's there, so they're not doing that. So I think the Hispanic community has been hit hard with them trying to find jobs or fill those gaps where they were working, and and plus, managing their kids at home or doing what just trying to make ends meet there. So uh, that's it.
Mhm. That's really important. As we start to think about, how hard communities are being hit, we also think about what changes on the horizon. Ryan, can you speak to anything that's going on in your local community that sort of maybe gives you a sense of hope on what the possibilities are going to be going forward?
Oh man, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Honestly, I know that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? I think what gives me hope is the amount of people that are engaged, the amount of people that are paying attention, and those that have maybe been on the sidelines or stepping off of it and getting involved. I think the education aspect of it is increasing, right? Because a lot of times we don't really understand from a government perspective what they are capable of doing and what each position uh, consists of, along with its possibilities, right? So I think this has been a time for people to while we're at home, right, we educating ourselves on different things, right, and understanding the many components, right, that make up our government and how private businesses and public entities work together for the quality of life for all of us. I think with this pandemic has exposed, how our school system play a much greater role than just educating our children, right? A lot of children, depend on the meals that they get at school, for so they can eat. A lot of parents depend on that time that their children go to school as for childcare, right? Here in Waterloo, we live in an area where the median income isn't very high, so you see a lot of people that they might be above that line that would allow them to get government assistance, right? But they don't really make enough money to pay for daycares or childcare, as expensive as it may be, and still provide for a certain quality of life for them and their family. I think that not just locally but nationwide, right? We're seeing unemployment numbers that
Yeah.
are just as high as there were during the Great Depression, right? And all signs point to the American economy collapsing, right? What at the height of the summer, the amount of our unemployment numbers. But I think that the a lot of the economy in Iowa, right, is set up to endure regardless, right? Well, we you know, a lot of places, you know, either have meat packing industries or something that is connected to agriculture, right? And as long as that people are living and breathing, people will need to eat. So um, the job thing is not as much of a problem as much as it is to keep workers safe and healthy, right? That's been our biggest thing we see when we talk about COVID, right? The impacts that it's had on Black communities for various reasons. Whether we're talking about pre-existing conditions or we just talking about the fact that we don't regularly go to the doctor because we don't have access to healthcare or quality healthcare facilities, right? We're not in a position to take days off, right? I need those hours. I need that overtime because, you know, the first of the month is always going to come around and the bills are always going to come, right? So it's so our communities are not often in a position, right, to take time off, right? And then in America, when you look at it versus other countries throughout the world, right? We always talk about hard working, right? No one wants to take a day off. The thing is either are you hurt or are you injured, right? If you hurt, you can keep going. If you injured, then maybe we need to go see somebody, right? But there's so many things that we work through, right? Whether our backs we having back pain or chest pain or whatever, right? It's just that's the motto or what's the word I'm looking for? Just like the American way, right? You don't feel pain, right? You just keep working through it, right? And at the end of the day, in these trying times, those things are coming back to bite our communities in the butt more than other communities.
Man, you said so many powerful things in there. I like to just unpack that a little bit. You know, you talked about the untold narratives. You talked about the untold stories of pain, of struggle, of everyday resilience. For each of you, you know, are there any stories that need to be further amplified from your community? Stories of resilience, stories of triumph, or just stories of folks just continuing to challenge. Is there anything that either of you would like to share with the group?
If I may rather, I'm quite sure.
And as we start to really think about these unwritten narratives, right? The stories that haven't been told, you know, a lot of them, especially after COVID, are really, you know, baked into a lot of historic disparities, you know. And so my question to each of you as a panelist, you know, what role is government supposed to play, right, in filling these systemic gaps, as well as what role are our communities supposed to play in sort of bridging these gaps of disparities? You know, who holds the biggest responsibility or the biggest burden? Would love to hear your perspectives.
I can, if I may jump in there, and I have to go back to you hit a chord. Can you hear me?
How about you, Steve? You know, as we talk about, you know, the disparities, you talked about the Latinx community, you know, really being in you said a similar situation as Black America. You know, can you speak to that a little bit more intimately? You know, what are some of those challenges that the Latinx community may be facing? Language also being an enormous barrier. What else exists that we can be made aware of?
Well, that's what I try to say is the the Latins and the Afro Americans will have the same issues, very much the same issues. Uh, like somebody was talking about the meat packings, and the last months, my friend Joe Henry from LULAC, he was fighting, you know, for those workers. I'm talking about the meat packing workers. There are African Americans there. There were Latins, there were people from Africa too, and they're working there because they need the job. And what happened with the government right now? But I'm talking about the state governor, the governor, the governor don't help us. They cut the unemployment and tell those workers from the meat packing to go back to work. When the COVID-19 wasn't the there was high, and it's still the same or it's still worse because the COVID-19 is still worse. But the people there, they contact me and they speak Spanish. Like 90% of those people, they told me, well, it's no protection in those workplaces. They don't care about their life. They only care about make meat or make money, and that's it, pretty much. So this is very, it's and I believe this is for the the Latino community, but the Afro American community we have the same issues. Education, if we don't get a free education, there's no way we can have a good job, you know. And if we don't have no, we don't have a good job. We're not able to make money in the future. And and the Latins, we have the same issues pretty much. But going back to the meat packings, is the problem here is the governor, because it's the Republican governor. Then now we need to remove the president. The president what we have right now is try to kill the Afro Americans and the Latins. They really don't care about us. So this moment is I'm very excited about this moment, about this year, but not about the COVID. The COVID is worse, but I'm talking about the political issues because events like these events right now, we have a conversation with the Latino community, like Latino leaders and the Afro American leaders. This is perfect. This is perfect. We had to work. We had to work. We had to vote together, for the same politics. They're supporting the the Latino community and the Afro American community. And another thing is going back to the COVID-19 issue. It's the same because we have the Republican governor right now in Iowa. They don't care about Latino workers, and they don't care. It is the same with the Afro Americans. I believe the Latinos were 82,000 Latinos they can vote in Iowa, and also I'm not sure it's 48 Afro Americans or 54 they can vote in Iowa. If we all together, we make conversations, and we work together with the politics, and then we vote for the same politics. They're supporting both communities. We're going to fix the issues in our state, and we can start set an example to another states, They all together because you see the numbers 84,000 Latinos and 54 Afro Americans in Iowa. If you put all together, it's like 136 about that. It's a good number. It's a big number, And thank you guys. This is a nice event, And to finish my issue about the meat packings, I believe in the Latino community in this year in Iowa, that issue was very, very sad, because people was dying because they working to get money for pay bills, for pay rent, and bring food to their children.
That's awesome.
Just smart guy. Just to piggyback a little bit on what Steve said about the meat packing industry is the governor. What they were denying the meat packing workers unemployment or pay because that's just the way she is. Plus, anyway, so and they can't miss work. They need that day of pay. So when they go home, most of those folks live with a smaller home or something, so they're getting the family exposed to the virus with their kids or wife or whoever's there with them. So, but the governor turned down, put a stop to unemployment. They couldn't collect unemployment if they caught the virus they had to, had to come to work. There was no PPE, very little PPE, not enough to go around to everybody. So, just to piggyback a little bit what Steve said about the governor and the meatpacking industry.
Councilman Peacock, are you still there?
Can you hear me, Mark?
Yeah, I think he might have been frozen for us.
Mark,
Definitely.
can you hear me?
And so what I like to do is sort of transition. Hopefully we can get yeah, Mr. Peacock. Yeah, I think he's coming back in there. There we go. There we go. I'm not sure how much of the discussion that you heard, but what we were talking about was how our leadership really has responded in this time of COVID, and how in many occasions we've seen responses that have not been helpful to the communities that really are the most vulnerable. Can you speak to what you've seen this year in our responses from our leaders and how they responded to COVID? And, we're kind of teeing up, why is it so important to vote?
Well, if you allow me to, can I go back to your previous question that you asked about what can the government and what
See if
we
you
can do?
unmute. There we go.
Can you hear me now? Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so to answer your question directly, so you asked about disparities and what we can do and what the government can do. I'm gonna go back to what Dr. King said a long time ago. The federal government, what they did, they undergird certain communities. They gave them access to land grant colleges. And not only that, they gave them land to farm on. But could you imagine if you multiply that by decades, by generations, where those two communities can be? So what can the government, what can the federal government do to help out with disparities? They can probably help out more or less with to assist with education, because I truly believe that education is a great equalizer. But moreover than that, to help out with the disparities, we gotta have equal access to healthcare. Not only that, we also have to have what I would call not only access to education, but access to healthcare. I think not only that, we have to go up and beyond the Call of Duty and go back to sense of community. It goes to my third point. We have to take care of one another, and I've been saying this for the longest time. You can look at other ethnic groups, and what they have done. They pull themselves together, and no matter what the federal government did, no matter what the state government did, they had a sense of community. And no matter if my brother, my sisters is happening to them, it should happen. I should be able to take care of them as well. So once again, we should not fully rely on the federal government. We should also look to ourselves, our communities, and form those bonds, form those bridges, and once again, continue to build what I call the village that will help one another prosper and grow. But what can the leaders do? I'll be apprehensive to really tell you, should we rely on the leaders that we're going to elect for this electoral cycle. I'm not going to get into the partisan politics of it, but the question is, what agenda, what is the ask, what do we ask of them to do for us? And when I try to educate people that look like me, we have to become what I call politically astute. Everybody wants to go and take a Photoshop with whoever the candidate may be. But what's the question I ask? What did you ask of that candidate? What resources are they going to bring back to your community? If you haven't asked that question, then you don't know politics. Then you need to bring those resources back to the community so your community can grow and prosper. So, you got to ask those hard questions. Why is my community the same way with the same leadership? Because you didn't ask the question. You didn't have the ask. They didn't bring those resources back to your community. And like I said, I was born and raised in Chicago for a long time, and everybody would say Chicago's been Democratic for a long time. And I will ask that question, if Democratic Party or whatever party you belong to has been in reign for that long, why are you have those same circumstances? So you have to go and hold those people that's in power accountable, regardless of what your political affiliation may be. I truly believe in being responsive to the community, and we got to, hey, the government works for us. Those elected officials work for us until we flip it around and they understand that you can't just go to Washington, you can't go to Des Moines and do whatever you want. No, you have to come back and answer for your vote. You have to answer for that legislation or that ordinance, and why or not you're not being responsive to the community.
Thank you for that. Ryan, anything to add?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I think, I mean, aside from everything that they touched on, right, the role of the government, right, is, you know, depending on which level we talk about, right. But it should. I would say when we talking about, you know, the pandemic and how COVID has affected us in our workplaces, right? Iowa is one of a handful of states that actually has its own OSHA. So the fact that looking at Tyson's here, right? Iowa OSHA goes in and doesn't find any findings of misconduct in any way, right? That's problematic, right? Where you think about the spread that really affected the Waterloo community. I mean, you know, it that was a hot spot, right? It made national news, you know, multiple nights in a row. And we had to think about it. Not only do those workers that worked in the plant, you know, the same workers whose spouses more than likely worked in our nursing homes, right? So not only we were, you know, different businesses and corporations putting people at risk, right? But it was playing a huge part in the spread. So we go from being considered essential workers but treated as expendable workers, right? We in the meat packing plants, they're telling people that they are the ones that feeding the country and keeping everyone alive, right? But then we'll send them home to potentially spread the virus amongst their families, right? Where their children are going to schools and their spouses, like I said, are, you know, a lot of times working in these nursing homes where we putting the elderly at risk, right? So I think the role of the government is to step in and do what's right for the greater good of the people, right? It might not be what's right for one individual person or a particular group of people, but their role is to be that safeguard for the greater good of all people, and in a lot of ways, right? On our state and federal level has failed us in that instance. So
That's really good. Thank you for that. And you talk about the greater good, you know, especially for those who've had the least or been the most vulnerable, you know, and Mr. Peacock speaks to, you know, we got to speak up, we got to ask for what we need. And during this moment, I think is no better time than to really make an ask. And, you know, one of the things that we have is the power of the vote. Like Steve says, you know, we have the power of the black and brown vote. But at this point in time, not everyone's sort of believing that their vote counts. So how can we sort of make sure everyone sort of regains confidence in the power of the vote? How can we make sure people know what to ask for in exchange for their vote? And most importantly, how can we really look at voting as a block, right, around certain issues that really matter to our communities? Can anyone speak to those things?
I think America as a whole has a voting problem. During presidential elections, like the voting population averages around 60%. During midterm elections, it averages around 40%, right? And oftentimes people are just I shouldn't say disconnected, right? Because I really believe that voter apathy is a thing, right? I think for so long we're steady telling people to vote, right? But it hasn't been often that we've given people something to vote for, right? So we steady telling people you gotta vote, right? And people, especially we telling the most disenfranchised and oppressed people, right? As if that the change they want comes through that vote, right? While voting is just a part of the process of creating change, right? It's one step in a step of a few other things, right? Whereas it's making those demands that Councilman Peacock talked about, right? Knowing policy and knowing what your community needs, and then it's voting, and then it's holding people accountable as well, like he said, right? And all of and along those three things, along with the protesting and the marching that we have been seeing not only across the country but throughout the world, right? So if the only way one thing works is if you do the other, and the only way the other thing works is if you do the other, right? So we have to do all four of those things in order to create change, right? So voting is just a portion of the process, right? You see in '08 in 2012, right? Black people especially had a higher turnout than any other demographic in the country, right? We went over 65% of eligible voters, right? Surpassing white people and all people, right? But we felt like we had something to vote for, right? We had our first black president on the ballot, right? And regardless of how people feel about his 8 years in office, right, it was still a sense of ownership, right? Regardless of what he did or didn't do, it was still a sense of feeling like, you know what, that's going to not only impact me, but impact my children in some way or another, right? So I think one of the issues, I think the first time that black voters had a decline was in 2016. In 2016, with it being an open seat, I think that it was different, right? We had President Trump versus, Secretary Clinton, right? And while both have been problematic for so many people for various reasons, right? I think that voter apathy really kicked in, right? The feeling of regardless of who in office, nothing is going to change for me. And I think that people really need to think about that, right? Like, it's real. I know a lot of people, right, that are terrified about this upcoming election, right? But I also know a lot of people that's like, man, it doesn't matter, right? Because the oppression that I feel, the lack of opportunity that I live through, and the different things that we go through on a day-to-day has happened through various administrations, right? So yes, we need to vote, but we also need to know that, it's only a part of the process for change. And I think that politicians and potential candidates need to understand that we can't just keep asking people to vote without giving them something to vote for.
Right. Let me add something. What we have here is the power of the vote. The black and brown community, we have the power of the vote, but we have to work together. Let me explain you. I'm being supporting candidates in the Democratic Party, but what I did is I made the candidate, I check his platform, right, and then I take my decision to support them, but I'll try to contact the Latino community and share with them what the politics of the candidate is offering to the Latino community, right? So because we have different issues with the with the Afro Americans and the Latino, we have the same issues, but like immigration, immigration is the big issue for the Latino community. So I put the number one priority and the Latino when they're going to vote. Well, let me explain you something. If we work together, if we endorse and we vote the same candidate, what is knocking the door and asking for the black and brown vote, you know, they're going to change because you know what happened. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, they don't right now because Trump is there. They don't care about the black and brown voters. They really don't care. But the Democratic Party is thinking they're automatically the Latinos in the case of the Latinos, we're going to vote automatically. But a lot of Latinos, they're not happy voting, but they told me, well, we don't have no choice. We had no choice. I'm supporting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I met Kamala Harris here and Joe Biden a couple of times and here in Iowa. I supporting them, but I'm talking about the like 50% of the Latinos. They're not happy, with this. They got no options. But the thing is, if we work together, the black and brown leadership, and we make meetings, and we choice and we support the same politics. They're asking for the black and brown vote, because I know we're not living in the same places, because what happened is when you see a candidate living in Polk County, they really care about the Latino voters, because in Polk County, we have, not sure, but we have about 18,000 Latinos or 19 people that can vote in Polk County, and they make a decision, like in the 2016, we support our U.S. representative. I don't want to say names. No names, but the all Latino, we support them. We support her. Then after she wins, 6, 8 months after that, she was voting against all the Latino interests. You know, so in 2017 she was against us. When in 2016 we support her. So that's what I'm trying to say. We need to keep watching the politics. We need to keep share the information, and the voting records of the politics. I know Republicans right now they don't care about the Afro Americans and the Latinos issues. They don't care, but the Democrats, yes. So we need to keep records, but all together, if we endorse the same politics, the same candidates together, we can make a change, because then they're going to before to make any decision, they we think about the elections, because right now they don't. Right now, everybody, if you call any candidate right now, they may be so nice with you, all the time. They maybe take attention right now, but after the elections, if they win, they really don't care about our communities. But we need to keep together. We need to keep working with the candidates and endorse the people where it's knocking for the brown and black voter. Because we have almost the same issue. The only issue what I don't see between us is the immigration. That's the only issue we don't have. But pretty much we have the same issue. Yeah.
Yes. So how do we, speak to that, anyone, how do we keep those elected officials accountable for that during that first 100 days? How do we sort of overcome the voter apathy, as Ryan mentioned? And how do we kind of continue to gain confidence in the power of the vote? Mr. Patrick, or please speak to that.
I can, and if you allow me to, I think we need to change the narrative of what we do in the community. Um, we can always talk about how many points LeBron James scored for the Lakers, who's a GOAT, who's this, and that, and the other. But what happens if I go into a barbershop and talk about, how many people in the Supreme Court justice, on why are we talking about packing the courts, on how is that problematic for people of the Black and brown community? I think once we do that, once we have those permanent discussions in the communities, then we can have what I call accountability, because everybody's going to be politically intelligent, or going to be politically astute about what's going on in the community. Once again, when you got to change the communication in the community, change those conversations. So we're not just talking about basketball. We're not talking about football, how many points the Bears scored. So we can talk about, what is Governor Kim Reynolds doing with the Ban the Box initiative? What are the Black legislators doing up in Des Moines? Once we start having those discussions in Des Moines, in Dubuque, Davenport, and then we can go take those same people and actually go to Des Moines and visit your legislature. Say, hey, what are you doing with our tax dollars? And that's what needs to happen. Once we change those conversations in the community, get everybody politically astute, then we can hold those legislators and city council members or those county supervisors accountable.
Awesome. Thank you.
I was going to say, I
Mark, do you
just
have?
wanted, yeah, kind of back up a little bit about people don't want to vote because their vote don't count, or they don't know what candidate they want to vote for. uh, I think you got to have those one-on-one conversations, or those one-on-two, and say this is why we're for this candidate. Yes, your vote does count. And just try to educate them that way, because um, uh, talking to masses sometimes that's fine, but sometimes when you're in a break room or lunchroom, or I even got friends of mine said I'm not voting because my vote don't care. I don't care. I just don't care. And so you got to start somewhere and see if you could chip away and say, well, your vote does count. You're older. You're a senior now. Or whatever your issue might be. So I try to have a few talking points and keep it on a even level, uh, instead of getting into your voice keeps going up and up like that. So anyway, I just want is those and those one-on-one conversations that I'm used to doing, or at work. Well, we're not at work; we're at home, so that makes it a little tougher to reach your membership, to um, you know, go to lunch with somebody or whatever. So that's just something I wanted to bring up.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. At a time when voter suppression here in Iowa has been literally lagging as it relates to the rest of the country, the governor this year finally sort of signed off on an executive order for there to be for felons to regain the right to vote. What this does is add a huge population of Iowans who had not had a chance to vote, given an opportunity to vote. Can anyone speak to how, momentous and how powerful really, eliminating those voter suppression rules here in Iowa can be, especially when we represent such a small minority of the majority Iowa population?
The other thing I could speak of, I have a personal friend who's has been released for some time and has been waiting and waiting and waiting to vote, and finally, uh, he can. So he was you know ecstatic about that because he's politically plugged in, or he knows the issues, or so, and he's been uh, hasn't been able to vote for several years, but now he can.
Mhm. Anyone else stories to
I
tell?
think that executive order, right, is now making tens of thousands of Iowans eligible to vote, right? I think that it's something very long overdue, and definitely should be, a constitutional amendment in the state of Iowa, right? We know what executive orders, right? That just depends on whatever the governor is in power, right? That can overturn that, right? So it was a step, for this cycle. But I think the timing of signing it and then getting everything finalized was also it created more barriers, right? So now we seeing if you are even eligible. But I guess I guess you got to take the wins, the wins that you can take, right? So I think one thing around, not just in Iowa but nationally, right? Giving felons the right to allowing felons to vote again, right? It's a narrative around that people think they're automatically going to vote a certain way, right? So depending on who's in power and what state, and because states have the power when we talking about voting rights, right? That's where you see the reluctance in different places, and it's sad that Iowa was one of the last places. I think if not the last, right, to allow felons to vote again. But I think that not only does it put people in a position to vote this cycle, right, but it's putting a lot of people back in the field of play to vote on local elections coming up, whether it's city or school board that directly affect them and their children, or preparing for, multiple races coming up in 2022. And I think when we talk about voting, right, it's something that we have to see as a civic duty, and something that it becomes a habit of us doing. Right. So I think that it also, if we paying taxes, right, don't we want to have a say in what's happening with our money, right? And when we decide to not vote, we're pretty much just taking our paychecks and throwing it up in the air, and whoever wants to get it can have it, right? Because that's what's happened with our tax dollars. And when we don't vote, right, and when we vote, what we are saying, whether we win or lose, whatever that candidate that you align with wins or loses, someone's agenda will be funded by your dollars. So I mean, that's another aspect, right? We all, just not giving our money away, right? I'm not just gonna let anybody do what they want to do with my money. I know. So I mean, I think that's a different way to talk about it. And like Councilman Peacock said, right, we got to change the narrative, and we got to start having these conversations in a different way, right? And talking about how this stuff directly impacts us, right? what we talk about sending our kids back to school, right? The governor has a sole power to make that decision, right? And my son goes to school in Des Moines, and I'm happy that their school district, fought tooth and nail to keep children out of schools, but it was only so much they can do, right? But if we don't turn out in 2018, we might have a different, if we all turn out in 2018, right, then we have a different governor, right? But, we have to be forward thinking in this stuff right now. Some things might not change or affect us immediately, right? But, it's we got to start thinking for the long road, right? Do you want the decisions that's being made to affect you or to affect your children, right? I know what I can handle, right? And I'm raising my children to be strong, but it's things that I don't want them to go through, right? But it's decisions that's being made right now that will affect them in 10, 15 years. So, like I said, like Councilman Peacock said, right, we have to change the narrative around the discussions that we have, right? And there's a lot more on the ballot than Biden versus Trump or Harris versus Pence, right?
Right.
Right now, we run a risk of losing Social Security, right? And we know what that will do to the Black and brown community, right? There are so many of our family members, loved ones that are living on that, right? Wherever, regardless of how much it is, right? We know that they need those Social Security disability benefits, right? To put a roof over their head, put food over their table, right? We're talking about pre-existing conditions are on the ballot right now when we're talking about insurance. I know my mother has multiple sclerosis, right? And she can't stand to be kicked off her insurance, right? And I know that that's the same thing for so many other people. We think about, public schools, right? We have the over the Department of Ed as someone that doesn't even believe in public education, right? We talk about the EPA and environmental practices and how they affect Black and brown communities more than anyone else, right? How we have higher risk of asthma. We see how COVID is infecting us, right? And we got to break it down and look at the quality of air that we have in our communities, because a lot of our communities, we live in these factory towns, right? The quality of our water is drastically impacted, compared to other communities, right? So when we, I know I kind of went off on a tangent, right?
All right.
But you got to think about it, right? There's so much more on the ballot, whether what we exactly what we want, right? But there are some things that under a certain administration, if they get wiped out, they will really destroy our communities. I mean, in some ways that we, that are fundamentally, man, that would really do some damage to us.
It's really great. Yeah, no, that's really awesome that you speak to that. Steve talked about issues that are primary to the Latinx community, and many of those being related to the African American community, but one that's being very specifically fought for is immigration. Is there an issue in the Black community that is like really needs to be sort of echoed to the highest mountain, to the highest mountaintop? Any one issue, any two issues? You mentioned Social Security and health insurance. Anything else?
Immediately, or just like in general?
Just whatever.
I mean, we definitely need to address, decreasing this wealth gap amongst, different races and populations, right? Like, man, we don't stand a chance, right? If we don't have access to resources, right? If we can't buy homes, if we can't start businesses, right? If things that, will give one independence, right? So we definitely need to address the wealth gap, right? We also need to address, the quality of education, right? When we've breaking education down to property taxes, right? And that's problematic, right? You can go to Ankeny or somewhere, right? They build new schools every week, it seemed like, right? But they have that value in their community, right? Or their homes, those tax incentives and revenue that they bringing in, right? When you're looking at Waterloo or you're looking at Marshalltown and different places like that, right, where we're not really bringing in that money like that, right? That's problematic, right? We as a state, we need to actually be funding education better. We sending kids to school right now, with minimum PPE, right? Leaving it up to families to send them with masks, right? I know I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, right? And it's hard for me to sit in a school sit in a mask all day, right? So what are we doing to making sure that our schools is as safe as possible and they have the resources that they need in order for not only for our children to be safe, but for our children to learn too?
That's powerful information. That's thank you. Well, now we're coming upon the 5-minute mark here where we're going to sort of close. But what I'd like to do is give each of you an opportunity to share what you or your organization or what your local community is sort of going through right now, what you're planning for, how can we support, what issues are there. We just really want to learn more about how we can, as leaders, continue to do the work that you're doing. Is anyone wanting to go first?
Well,
I'll go first.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I'm going to have to start doing some more networking. Doing some door knocking or phone calling at least, or do something to reach out to people that are registered voters, that especially the Hispanic community, because that's what I pretty much tied in with. Been working hard on that for the last 2 or 3 months as we got close up to the election. But it's I think you got to do something every day. Make phone calls or write postcards or whatever, and just to encourage people to get out to vote. And I know I'm going to be chasing ballots down, or even driving people to the polls, as I did the last time. So, as we come down to, I guess I'll go back. It makes things a little harder with the virus, but you got to keep moving on. This is too big of a fight that we cannot lose, and have 4 more years of this administration.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody else want to add?
What I'm going to do, I'm going to try to stop this polarization, if you will, because our community is so fragmented. So I'm going to try to do is bring all these communities together, educate them as best I can on why we should be as a community, so we can fight some of these disparities in our community. As we all know, some of these issues don't affect other communities as the same. But once we can educate one another, we can have what I call empathy. Hopefully, we can solve some of these issues, and then it will be all for naught. And that's the only thing I can do for my community.
Thank you.
Well, in my case, I'm very excited to let you know I'm the political director of the Unified Deported Veterans, and they're working very hard. I don't know if you guys see the Netflix series about about that, and those guys are expecting the new government. The new government will bring those people back, and we're working hard, and we're making deals already, and I hope we can bring back those 224,000 veterans. They're supposed to be immigrants. They're come between 4, 3, 5 years old to the United States in the 1980s, 1990s, and they fight for our nation, and then the government just take the people back to their country, and they got no hope, in other country, because their country is the United States, because they fought for this country. And I'm very excited to say we hope next year we can bring those veterans back to their country, and we're working very hard with those with Cesar Lopez. I think he's the guy from Netflix. He was the star of the series Immigration Nation, and I'm working with him every 2-3 days. We got phone calls and everything, and they're working very hard to bring those veterans. And we talk right now. We're talking with the senators, with the U.S. representative, to put all together, for next year. And this is what I'm doing right now for my community, not just in Iowa. It's the Latino community in the whole country, because the veterans are from different states, not just from Iowa. And fighting for the immigration reform, because if we bring those veterans back, then we have a lot of opportunity to open the door for dreamers, and next for the 16 millions of the immigrants that are living undocumented. We have a hope for that, and we can change the life of millions of people, Latinos. They're living right now here in the United States and living a nightmare. That's why they're leaving. Yeah.
Thank you. Any final words here, Ryan?
Like Mark said, right? We got to do something, right? And right now, when we look like we're talking about the four things that I talked about earlier, right? We protested all year, all summer, and now is our time to vote. But we all need to know that the work doesn't stop with just voting. The fight for equality, liberation, and justice for our people is not going to be easy work, right? But it's not going to be something that we can give up on and expect everything to be solved come November 4th. There's issues that our communities have faced for decades, right? And the only way that we will get what we deserve is if we keep standing up for that, right? So I say, keep fighting the fight, right? And know that, right? As long as we stand on what we believe in and what we know to be true, that victory will come one day.
Awesome. Well, those are some really great words to end this. I really appreciate each and every one of you for your time this evening, for you sharing your voices and sharing your comments and insights. I agree. It's time for us to continue this change and momentum, and we have to vote, and we must vote, and continue to stay in tune to organizations like No Justice, No Peace, and the New Frontier, as they continue to help shape what the first 100 years of whatever election and whatever president we actually go into. So I really want us to look at 2021 as being the example of what the new year is going to be for us. And I think this time is no better time than the present during this transformational and change moment. And so I really wanted to thank each of you for your time and for sharing with our communities today. Okay. Well, thank you.
All right.
We'll have a
All
nice
right.
evening.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Be safe. Be safe.
Thank you.